This is BBC One. Now, from the West, Journey Back recalls the lost mines of Mendip.
For well over 2,000 years now, man has burrowed and blasted, dynamited and dug his way into the wealth of the Mendip Hills. Stone for building, lime for the fields, lead for the roofs, coal for the furnaces, calamine for the brass industry, and silver for its own sake. Most of these industries are now dead. Some are taking on a new lease of life. All have left their scars on the landscape. The Mendips straddle the eastern corner of Somerset, and their very name points to their long and busy past. For they used to say of Mendip, mine deep. This chimney at Smitham Hill is a 19th century reminder of one of the oldest and richest industries in Somerset, the mining of lead. It was lead, and the silver it contained, that brought the Roman legions here in 43 AD. Now, mining had been going on here for at least 200 years, but with predictable efficiency, the Romans reorganized all that. First of all, they nationalized the mines. Now, this is obviously a museum replica of a lead pig, and on it is stamped the emperor's name, Imp Vespasian Augustus, the Emperor Vespasian. And on its side, there's another stamp showing that it was made here. Brit X Arg, made in the British Silver Works, and then VEB, which is almost certainly an abbreviated version of the name that the Romans called this place. The Romans took the Mendip lead mines very seriously indeed, for underneath all this grass are remains of the fort they built, a town, and even a small amphitheatre. After the Romans left, the mining still went on, as you can see from this bumpy ground. It's called Gruffy ground, after the deep grooves or veins of ore along which the medieval miners worked. Each man worked for himself, but he had to abide by an ancient set of laws and traditions. Now, these stated exactly how a miner should stake his claim once he had found a vein of lead. He had to throw his hack as far as he could. A hack is a miner's pick like this, but these came in various weights, and so to stop people cheating by using a very light hack, there was what was called the law hack of exactly 4 pounds. And then the law said, "He that doth throw the hack shall stand in the said groove to his waist or girdle." And then no man may work within the compass of the said hack's throw. Right, here we go. And now, under ancient mining law, I can mine as far as that. After the old miners had hacked the lead ore from the grooves, they took it to the surface to be washed. And on Mendip, that was something of a problem, for with the porous limestone rock, water was scarce. Whoever owned the few streams controlled the mines. In the Middle Ages, the owners were known as the Lords Royal, and between them, they divided up Mendip. This old map at Mells Manor shows the 4 minories or liberties. One at Charterhouse, another above Harptree, and the last two at Priddy. Down the sides of the map are set out the famous code of mining laws, and in the corners are 4 pictures. One shows 3 miners working down a shaft. Another shows all the miners' tools. And here, there's a large crowd beside a fire. Perhaps it illustrates the penalty for breaking one of those old and often harsh laws.
That if any man of that occupation do pick or steal any lead or lead ore to the value of 13.5 pence, the lord or his officer shall put him into his house or work and set fire in all together about him, and banish him from that occupation before all the miners for ever.
But even if a miner kept the right side of the law, he'd no protection against lead pollution, which poisoned both man and beast. The Vicar of Frome noted in 1688,
There is a flight in the smoke which, falling on the grass, poisons those cattle that eat of it. They find the taste of it upon their lips to be sweet, when the smoke chances to fly in their faces. If this flight mix with the water, it hath poisoned such cattle as have drunk it, after a current of 3 miles.
the risk of poisoning, the cost of sinking deeper shafts, the danger of flooding, they all spelt the end for the lead mines once the surface ore had been exhausted. By the end of the 18th century, cows once again could safely graze, but not for long. Priddy in the mid-19th century, a vast new smelting works built on the visions of wealth seen by the mining engineers from Cornwall. The industry would thrive again. What caught the Cornishmen's imagination were the heaps of slag left by the free miners. Earlier methods had extracted only a small amount of lead from the ore that had been mined. Using modern smelting techniques developed in the Cornish tin mines, the engineers realized that here was lead for the taking. Here at Charterhouse, they opened up again in about 1850 with modern machinery and high hopes. The new smelting furnaces were driven by large steam engines. There was one here, actually, just behind me in the undergrowth. But most of the lead vaporized and would have been lost with the smoke if it had not been passed along these special flues before being released up the chimney. The smoke came all the way along this tunnel for, oh, what is it, about 100 yards. And here it was met by a blank wall going up here, roof over the top. And so it was forced to go round through 180 degrees and back down another 100-yard tunnel towards the chimney. The point of these long tunnels, of course, was to allow as much length as possible for the smoke to go through so that the lead oxide in it, and I'm looking for some, could settle on the walls of the tunnel. There should be some here, although it's so wet. Yes, here we are. There's some still in position there. That's lead oxide. It must have been an awful job spending the day in these tunnels, going backwards and forwards, scraping off what was a very dry, powdery dust. The close of the 19th century saw the end of the Cornishmen's dreams. The slag wasn't as rich as they'd hoped, the cost was greater, the price of lead uncertain. In 1908, St Cuthbert's Minery at Priddy closed. Charterhouse and Waldegrave were in ruins by then, and the tall chimney at Smitham had been used for just 8 brief years. The grass is again covering the scars of that mining industry, but the burrowings of the lead miners are mere molehills compared with the mountains of slag the coalmen heaped up on the opposite side of Mendip. They dug out practically all this lot in the last 150 years, and this is just the waste. And all this, despite the thin and crooked seams of the Somerset coalfields, which always spelt human misery and economic uncertainty. So it's not surprising that the Somerset mines were high on the list of pit closures in the 1960s and 70s. Yet here at Kilmersdon, the last of the mines to close is already the first to reopen, but in a different form. For, just as in lead mining, a lot of valuable stuff was thrown away. Here, all you've got to do is scoop it, wash it, separate it, and there's your coal. Mining was never this easy. Here I'm in the Nettlebridge Valley on eastern Mendip, one of the centres of the early pre-industrial revolution coal mining. They didn't have to go very deep here because the coal outcropped, so there were drift mines, holes going into the side of the hill along here, or bell pits, not very deep pits, which went down a few feet and then people dug them out, dug out the coal by digging at it roundabout like that. But all these mounds, which have occasionally been taken for prehistoric burial mounds, are in fact nothing more than the slag heaps of this early industry. You can easily see this if you just look at the rabbit scrapes or take a little pick into these mounds, and here they are, full of coal slag, including some quite big bits. So these innocent-looking mounds really represent the earliest phases of the coal industry. These early mines were very like those still being worked in the Forest of Dean. Private mines, run by just a few men using simple hand tools and providing coal for a small local market. But by the 19th century, all the shallow seams had been exhausted. There was still coal in Somerset, but it lay a lot deeper underground. It meant the end of the free miners and the rise of the new capitalists, local businessmen and landowners who could afford to invest and take risks. In 1749, prospector James Lansdowne was thought quite mad when he took a 42-year lease on Lord Waldegrave's apparently barren estate. 14 years later, he dumbfounded his critics by finding coal at Radstock. The effects were dramatic. From an obscure country village, Radstock turned almost overnight into the capital of the Somerset coalfield, as some 20 or more pits were sunk in the hills and valleys round about. Ludlow's Colliery, Old Mills, Farrington Gurney, Kilmersdon, and many others. We can learn a lot about the miners at Camerton from a diary kept by the rector of the parish, the Reverend John Skinner. On the 10th of July, 1822, he wrote,
"There was a great shouting at the coal works, music playing, singing, etc., which I could hear from the parsonage field. The proprietors at the work had distributed money on account of the discovery of a fresh vein of coal. This is indeed good news for the many who depend on the prosperity of the mines."
This happened on Wednesday. The next day, the news was less good.
"I shall be heartily glad when this scene of drunkenness and uproar is at an end. No work done at the pits, and the people are more brutified than ever."
On Sunday, worse things were in store for the indignant rector.
During the evening service, the church was crowded. The singers, who have been in a state of constant intoxication, being offended because I would not suffer them to chant the service after the first lesson, put on their hats and left the church. This is the most open breach of all religious decorum I have ever witnessed.
From the church, his parishioners went on to the Red Post public house, and there they decided that in future they would sing for the Methodists. But the Methodists liked drunken singing no better than the Reverend Skinner, and they did their utmost to improve morals and behaviour in the mining communities. They had an uphill task. For when the men were not celebrating good news, they were trying to drown bad, if they had the money. One of the worst jobs was man-hauling the coal putts, using the infamous Gus and Crook harness.
14-year-old, I was 14-year-old when I started. I had to do all this carting work. And then I had to, they call it carting, when you all in this spot. They call it the carting by. Carting by, they call it.
What is it makes a young and a likely lad go down? Far from the light of day, what sends him underground? To win his bread in the dark of the mine, where the rain never falls and the sun never shines. What makes a man go down?
The Gus and Crook was the hallmark of the Somerset mines, and its memory the most indelible of the coalfield. It was the symbol of oppression, yet for the men who wore the Gus and Crook, it was also a vivid symbol of their toughness and their strength.
Many a time, I piddled in the pot, listen, I had a piece of rag and rubbed into your ribs. Oh, yes, where you're sore, yes. Yes, I wet it in me and rub it into my ribs and on my knees. Make it hard.
We were born and bred to it, you see. That's the trouble. We were born and bred a miner.
There was no choice when we were young.
Well, that was the only job there was, really, that and farming.
They put I and my friend down at the number 5, what they call in Braedown Colliery. We went with 3 men there, and they were completely naked. It was so hot and so small, they were running about completely naked, and they put me in head, what they call the head, where the coal, to pull the put out. You couldn't turn the shovel over in there, you couldn't turn your feet over in there.
We could work under that seat easy if we had that height for the seat.
That was a good height.
The other side. Our legs all out straight, see?
I'll show you. There you are. Like that.
We had to be like a mouse or a mole when we were under there. We never had much room to turn round, but we did get over it.
The coming of steam power hardly made the miner's life any easier. For with steam to drive the pumps and the winding gear, so the mines became deeper, more productive, and also a lot more dangerous. Yet, in a curious way, the danger only served to strengthen the comradeship between the Mendip miners.
How I found, once you was underground, everybody were mates. Because you could ill afford to have a bad friend.
There's no mates like a miner, because you had to rely on them for your life. You understand what I mean? If you made a mistake, well, you might get your head hit off or your leg hit off or something else. You had to rely on them.
There's now 4 generations of our family have worked here. 3 of us underground, and my father was killed in this mine here. As you were, my grandfather was killed in this mine. He was a shaftman, and I'm afraid he left 7 children, and they had to fend pretty much for themselves in those days. The youngest was about 9 at the time.
Today, Alex Han lives at Norton Hill Colliery, scene of one of the worst disasters in the history of the Mendip coalfield. It happened on Thursday, the 9th of April, 1908. A huge explosion which killed 10 men and boys. At 11:30 that night, William Chivers, Hubert Atwood and William Gould descended the shaft to rescue any survivors. Nothing was heard from them, so a second party was sent underground. Silence for 6 hours. A third party was sent to investigate. Finally, both parties were found alive but dazed, lost in the smoke-filled galleries. The one exception was William Chivers, who'd been overcome by fumes and left for dead. Miraculously, he was revived after lying unconscious for almost 10 hours. The official inquiry showed that the men who died had been firing explosives without first damping down the coal dust. Similar disasters at Camerton and Timsbury had just been ignored. Oddly, Somerset miners had long been well provided for above ground. Radstock, for example, is a remarkable survival of that peculiarly Victorian phenomenon, the well-planned company town, with its rows of more or less identical miners' cottages and its civic buildings, which were built to impress. Most of these were provided by Frances, the Dowager Countess Waldegrave, from the proceeds of her local pits. But there were still snags. The problem was transport, how to get the coal out of Radstock, up these hills and away to Bristol and elsewhere. At the start of the 19th century, a canal was dug, but that wasn't enough for at least one mine owner who gloomily remarked that the bulk of the coalfield was dormant for want of railway accommodation. Even when the Great Western Railway arrived here from Frome in 1853, it took another 20 years before the connection was made with Bristol. Still, better late than never, I suppose, particularly with such a heavy commodity as coal, where good transport is essential. Anyway, by the 1870s, Radstock had become the capital of the Somerset coalfield, with its 2 railway stations on 2 different lines and innumerable tramways connecting the nearby mines to what had by then become a Victorian Boomsville. The railways gave a big boost to production, and by 1910, the output from the Somerset coalfield reached its peak, with 1.25 million tonnes. But the impetus was not to last. Faced with the country's most narrow and faulted coal seams, the Somerset pit owners were reluctant to invest their limited capital on new machines. The industry fell into steady decline. In 1947, nationalisation brought fresh hope.
Is that your pits now?
He said yes. He said, she's like a man getting married to a woman. You've got to pull her together.
But after that, they brought these conveyor belts, cutters and everything into the colliery then. They've done away with a lot of hewing of coal by hand.
There are changes on the way.
Underground, underground.
You can see them every day.
Underground.
There are cutters at the face, and they're speeding up the pace, and you'd hardly know the place.
Underground, underground. And you'd hardly know the place. Underground.
If you haven't got a seam, 2 foot or 2 foot and a half, he isn't worth working, Colonel.
And you got to be 200 yards long today to work. A machine cut face or a plough face, you got to be 200 yards. They won't work nothing less than 200 yards.
Well, it wouldn't warrant machinery.
No,
No. For the men who win the coal,
Better days, better days.
gone the margarine and dole.
Better days.
There's still dirt and toil and sweat, and the coal's still hard to get. And though danger's with us yet, there's better days,
And we'll beat the danger yet. Better days.
Better days indeed for gas, oil, nuclear power, for by the mid-60s, coal was no longer in vogue. Cash was concentrated on the nation's largest and most productive pits. Somerset hadn't got any. One by one, the pits closed down.
That's what shut the pits, mine. After this machine ran after the phase. The machine, yes. That's what shut the pits. Plenty of coal, yes, there's plenty of coal here.
The end came on the 28th of September 1973, when the last load of coal was brought to the surface at Ridlington. The Somerset miners had lost their long and bitter battle, defeated not by dirt, danger and hardship, but by economics. As the coal board moved out, the vandals moved in. The once busy pits have become a place for melancholy and memories. Stoker Herbert Loader and his wife have lived in Kilmersdon all their married lives. I think you can hardly bear to look at this scene of desolation now, can you?
It's awful. It come up, you know.
Now, when you were working here, what were you actually doing?
I was driving the steam engine that took the coal to the railways. I drove the engine 35 years.
Well, that's not...
No, not too bad. And our job was to get the coal away and to bring the trucks back to keep the pit going, you see. And we used to take the coal across the road, through them gates, to bring the trucks in, go up through the screens, drop the empties down in for ready for reloading, you see. Yes. And out to the incline. Yeah. One load down and one empty coming up. Which was gravity incline, you see. Yes. That's what the job was all day long.
And when did you take your last train out of here?
1973. But I actually worked till 74, to in the Pinhead Bars till the miners finished underground. Yes. There was just a few left to bring out the materials.
And now, 5 years later, that's what the baths look like.
That's the bars now. Yeah. I shouldn't care to go up there myself, anyhow. That's the offices. That's the offices there. The clock house, where we used to clock our cars, and lamp room. I came round here the other day, and all the clock cards was flung all over the floor. And I looked them through, and the third I picked up was my own. And I took it round home, cleaned it up, and I got it in my scrapbook. 1960.
Oh, this was his pride and joy, the engine.
Was it? Well, I can see that from the way it's shining on here.
Yes, it's real pride and joy, yes.
Perhaps you looked after that better than you did your wife.
Well, I tried to.
Well, both of them seem to have done very well on it.
If you could have seen the incline running, you know, it's just very fascinating. We had to take the coal out, top of the hill, you see, it's called Fox Hills. Then, how long was the incline? 300 or 400 yards, I suppose.
And this is working purely on gravity?
Yeah.
Yes.
Once I saw the head welder, he went down to do a job. Well, the slack rope that was on this truck here, he got inside the loop. And when the load came over the top, the rope flung him right over into that bank.
Must look very different now without the wheels at the top of the shaft.
Oh, yes, it does seem a shame, because I used to get up mornings, pull back my blinds, and the first thing I used to see was the pit wheels. And, you know, see them going round and hear the men shouting, and, like as I said, everything going on in the yard. And, well, honestly, it took us quite a couple of years to really realise that it was all over. It was a very sad day, I think, for everyone.
Sad socially and sad from economics of the country. We've got our own energy here in our own county. It's been worked for 200 years, and I think that we can't afford to neglect it and overlook it. It'll have to be worked again. In fact, to that extent, I have sought permission to open my own small mine, which may provide a thread of continuity, if you like, between the board leaving here and coming back one day, because they will be back one day. I'm positive of that.
There is millions of tons of coal still left in these collieries.
But in the whole country they have used about 10% of the coal.
Yes. I think that we can't really afford to walk about over all this coal and import energy from abroad.